In the middle of Buckingham at night, a secret recording played as if someone had accidentally opened a door, letting darkness pour in. The voice of a woman rang out, steady and cold enough to send chills down the listener's spine. Let them believe I am weak. Only when they pity me will the crown belong to us. No gasps, no tremors, only calm calculation. The words cut across the values that the royal family had upheld for centuries like a sharp blade. And as soon as they faded, a question immediately arose in the mind of anyone listening. If weakness can be turned into a tool for gaining power, what is really happening behind those closed doors? In the heavy atmosphere of Buckingham, three people sat facing each other, none daring to speak. Charles bowed his head, his deep-set eyes like someone who had just lost the most important thing in his life. William crossed his arms, his sharp gaze fixed on the wooden table as if he were scrutinizing every lie hidden beneath the surface. Anne stood straight, her eyes stripped of their usual softness, replaced by a determination that seemed to pierce through the fog of secrets enveloping the family. The silence in the room was so thick that everyone could hear their own heartbeat. Then everything they had long tried to avoid suddenly materialized through scattered fragments. Pills that had never been touched, medical records with no one accountable, names of doctors that never existed. Each small detail seemed to pull together, weaving into an undeniable truth. From that moment, everyone understood that this was no longer a story about weakness, but a story of ambition strong enough to betray the trust of a king. It all began on a heavy afternoon in a little-known mansion, where Camilla often went whenever she needed to handle matters that could not be exposed in Buckingham Palace. Inside the small office of a private doctor, the yellow light fell on neatly stacked files on the desk. The silence was so complete that even the scratch of a pen made one startle. There, Camilla sat on a velvet chair, hands gripping her handbag tightly, eyes constantly flicking to the door as if afraid someone would walk in. The doctor, accustomed to serving the aristocracy, opened a pristine white file, waiting for instructions. Then Camilla's voice rose, barely audible but enough to chill the room. I need a convincing file. No one must suspect. The doctor studied her for a long moment. He understood that the woman before him did not just need a normal health certificate. She wanted a disease, a diagnosis, a shield. Both the public and the royal family, upon seeing these papers, would think Camilla was suffering from such severe depression that she could not withstand any turmoil. The doctor signed. Each word became evidence of an imagined crisis, meticulously arranged. The secret call happened immediately afterward. Camilla stood by the window, the light illuminating her face, making her skin pale. She whispered to someone on the line, "The file will be sent in a sealed envelope. It must not be lost." She emphasized every word as if any slip could make everything collapse. When the call ended, she tucked the file into her bag and walked away quickly. Everyone in the building understood that they had just witnessed something they should not have, yet no one dared to utter a word. What made this scheme frightening was not only the forged file, it was the sophisticated strategy Camilla had employed for years. She knew that in the image war with the royal family, especially with William and Princess Anne, weakness could become a powerful weapon. When a woman stood before the public with a tired face, sad eyes, and a resigned expression, people were more likely to feel compassion than resentment. Criticism softened. Questions became fewer. The public could be angry at the coldness of the royal family, but sympathize with someone collapsing under pressure. And Camilla understood this as an artist understands every beat in a familiar piece of music. She appeared before cameras with a fragility that made people believe she had just endured a sleepless night. Once, stepping out of a car for an event, she raised her hand to her forehead as if trying to recover from dizziness. Photographers immediately captured the moment. The photos spread across newspapers, creating the image of a woman caught in the turmoil of royalty, just trying to survive. No one knew that behind it all was a carefully prepared script. Camilla's strategy also targeted a larger goal. She had to deal with William, who had kept his distance from her since Diana's death. William had never hidden his discomfort when thinking about Camilla's role in his parents' marriage. He did not speak it in front of the cameras, but the icy attitude he displayed had become obvious to everyone. The public sided with William, and Camilla understood that if she confronted him directly, she would certainly lose. Therefore, her only choice was to make everyone believe she was not the aggressor. She was the one hurt. She needed protection. Princess Anne was different. Anne was straightforward, practical, and cold as steel. She did not believe in tears. She did not trust displays of weakness. To Anne, Camilla had long been the one who intruded into her brother's life and caused tragedy for Diana. Every time Anne saw Camilla, she felt something wrong that had not yet been set right. Yet if Camilla held medical records, if the media portrayed her as under severe pressure, Anne would have to weigh every word. She could not appear overly rigid towards someone believed to be in a fragile mental state. Camilla's strategy was precisely that. Not to confront directly, but to make her opponents limit their own strength. Behind that mask of weakness, however, lay a long story of childhood and insecurity that never disappeared. Camilla grew up in a well-off family but always felt overlooked. She was born into high society, but was not the kind of woman celebrated. No one looked at her with admiration. No one thought she could become a face of the royal family. As she grew, she was always compared to women who were prettier, more prominent. And the worst part was that in every conversation about Charles' love life, the name Diana always ranked above hers, sometimes far above. Camilla might be the one Charles loved, but in the public eye, she was never enough, never worthy, never able to surpass the shadow of the woman who had brought the world to tears. That comparison cut into her self-esteem like a knife, day after day, month after month. And when Charles ascended the throne, that obsession only grew stronger. The glory was too great for her to remain merely a woman behind the king. She needed recognition. She needed to be seen. She needed to be regarded as a true queen. That obsession was most evident in words heard by those close to her, spoken by her own mouth. If I do not become queen, they will never see me as worthy. It was no longer a wish. It was a survival necessity, like someone sinking in the sea needing to grasp something to avoid being swept away. That is why creating a facade of weakness was not just a political scheme. It was also a means for Camilla to protect the most fragile part of her soul. She did not want anyone to see her true self. She did not want anyone to know her instability, her insecurities, and the shadow Diana always cast over her. She needed everything controlled. She needed the story written in the way most favorable to her. And that forged file was the first chapter of that story. Camilla stepped out of the clinic in the fading sunset. Her face retained the tired look the public was accustomed to, but her eyes gleamed with calculation. She knew that from that moment, the game had changed. She was no longer merely the one suspected. She was the one rewriting how the world would see her. And if this scheme succeeded, no one could overturn it. Yet even the most discreet schemes leave small cracks. And one of those cracks appeared where Camilla least expected it. It was a gloomy morning, when weak sunlight filtered through thick curtains, falling on the cold stone floor of the palace's secondary kitchen. A servant, familiar with every corner of Buckingham, was cleaning old medicine shelves when he suddenly stopped. Before him lay a blister pack, intact but never used, lying alone on a metal tray. He frowned, lifted it, then gently placed it back as if afraid to disturb the already heavy atmosphere. The sunlight slanted through the window, reflecting off the blister pack, making it stand out among the familiar bottles. A strange feeling spread through him. Something was not right. He quietly walked to Anne's room. As soon as he opened the door, he whispered, voice trembling, eyes darting around. "Your Highness, something is not right." Anne slowly raised her head, her sharp eyes focused on the servant. The space suddenly fell silent. Only a few short seconds, yet heavy as if the entire palace were holding its breath. She understood that even a small irregularity could be the key to uncovering all the secrets Camilla sought to hide. Without reproach, Anne merely nodded and quietly instructed to keep it secret. This was not a time for noise, but a time to observe every detail. Immediately, Anne and William began a silent investigation. They spent hours in the private study, opening every file, flipping through every page like detectives searching for clues. Each file was full of numbers, lines of text, forged signatures that only a keen eye could recognize. William was serious, his gaze as cold as steel, never leaving the files. He carefully took notes, checked every medicine code, compared each doctor's signature with stored records. The surrounding space grew tense like a detective film, every page turn and pen stroke echoing clearly amid the silence. Anne was different. She was sharp and meticulous, scrutinizing even the smallest details others would overlook. Looking at the fake medical reports, she noticed minor inconsistencies, gaps Camilla had deliberately created to make them seem real. Anne did not hide her discomfort. She knew she was facing an extremely sophisticated scheme, but at the same time she was intrigued by her own ability to handle it and her sharp intuition. She quietly compared each handwriting sample, each seal, each medicine, forming a complete picture only she and William could see. While William and Anne focused on logic, on evidence, Charles was swept into an inner turmoil. He read each report Anne sent, his hands trembling, eyes blurred with tension. Charles always wanted to believe in Camilla, wanted to believe that the woman he loved could not commit such a vile act. In the dark room, light fell only on his face, highlighting the wrinkles of anxiety and hurt. He whispered to himself, Camilla could not do this. She is not that kind of person. Yet every line, every ink mark on the files contradicted that belief. Stretching his heart little by little, the opposition within the royal family became clearer than ever. The rational side, William and Anne, were resolute, decisive, allowing no emotion to interfere. They worked with full alertness, peeling back the layers of the mask Camilla had created. The emotional side, Charles, floated between love and hate, between trust and doubt. Each time William looked at his father with a firm gaze, Charles felt a mixture of humiliation and helplessness. He wanted to protect Camilla, but the truth was close, and that truth was more painful than any wound. Soft but tense conversations continued. William often suggested in a calm but firm tone, each word like a precise cut, forcing Charles to face the truth he could not avoid. Charles did not react immediately. He lowered his head, quietly picking up the reports Anne sent, page by page reminding him that Camilla was not as simple as he thought. In the late nights, Charles often sat alone in the study, hands trembling over the papers, eyes staring into the distance through the window, where faint moonlight fell on the wooden floor. He listened to the wind whistling through the panes, as if the entire palace were reminding him of a truth he was not brave enough to face. It was not only numbers and signatures. The investigation revealed subtle conflicts within. William and Anne discovered many irregularities, medicines never prescribed, medical files missing basic information, and papers signed by doctors who had never appeared in the records. Each discovery was like a small brick forming a wall that blocked light, yet leaving a crack big enough for everything to collapse if handled carelessly. Anne took notes meticulously, her gaze sharp, while William folded the files, eyes distant as if envisioning the entire scheme behind. Charles, though in pain, still tried to defend Camilla in his heart. He repeated a familiar phrase, "She is not that kind of person." But even as he wanted to believe, the cold evidence lined up before him, giving no chance. Each piece of the truth pierced his heart, forcing him to consider, can love cover all lies? Or has it come time to awaken and face the cruel reality? The atmosphere in the palace grew heavier each day. The servants looked at each other, afraid to speak. William and Anne continued their investigation, seeking every clue from private doctors, medical staff, and old files never before examined. They knew a small mistake, a single overlooked document, could expose the entire scheme sooner or later. Charles wrestled between love and duty, often murmuring words to reassure himself, Yet those very words betrayed the fear and despair slowly sinking into his heart. In secret meetings with William and Anne, Charles did not dare to openly argue, but his eyes spoke volumes. Each time William presented more evidence, Charles retreated inwardly. This soft confrontation lasted for days, sometimes a week. No shouting, no direct attack, only glances, reports, and moments of silence long enough to hear one's own heartbeat. But those initial small cracks, the lone blister pack, inconsistent papers, created an irresistible force. William and Anne gradually pieced everything together, each detail becoming clearer, each evidence revealing the bigger picture. Charles, though pained, began to realize that love could not cover every truth. In the dark study, amid flickering candlelight, he sat for hours, hands trembling over the reports, whispering the names of medicines, the signatures, trying to rationalize what his mind knew but his heart still refused to accept. The secret exchanges in the palace gradually reached a climax. William could not hide his tension. Anne was sharp, her words piercing every void in Charles' heart. He tried to protect Camilla, tried to find reasons to explain, but all escape routes were closed. Even a few words from William, light but precise, made Charles shiver, forcing him to face the reports he had once wished to forget. Every night, Charles experienced inner torment. He read Anne's reports repeatedly, hands trembling over the papers, eyes blurred in dim light. He recalled Camilla's past words, the pleading gaze he once trusted. But now, faced with cold evidence, that belief crumbled. Love or truth? Which would prevail in a king's heart? There was no answer, only moments of tension so suffocating they took one's breath away. The internal investigation not only revealed the scheme, but also exposed the royal family's inner conflict. Reason versus emotion, love versus duty, power versus truth. The small initial cracks, discovered by a servant by chance, opened the door to a vast web of lies, forcing the palace to awaken and confront the darkness enveloping their family. Step by step, clue by clue, glance by glance, whisper by whisper in the night, the story that the public had never witnessed unfolded. And in that silence, among papers and flickering candles, William and Anne discovered not only the truth about Camilla, but also understood that to protect the royal family, to preserve the throne's honor, they had to face choices more difficult than anything before. Charles, though heartbroken, had to accept that love could not forever mask the truth, and that ultimately, the royal family's reason would prevail, despite the emotions of a torn king. When doubts became large enough, a single piece of evidence was sufficient to make the truth surface, and that evidence appeared in a confrontation no one wanted to face. The closed room was lit by dim yellow lights, each corner seemingly absorbing all sound, leaving only the heavy breathing of those sitting around the old wooden table. Charles and William faced Dr. Dunn, their tense eyes piercing the space, making the atmosphere so heavy that even a breath felt cautious. Dr. Dunn, a middle-aged man with a pale face and weary eyes, looked down at his hands, trembling as he held a thick file. He knew the truth he carried could change everything. Charles' breath, slow but deep, echoed in the room, blending with the silence until every drop of time seemed to fall on the wooden floor. William remained calm, but his gaze was sharp, leaving no detail unchecked, seemingly scanning every corner of the doctor's mind. I was forced, Dunn said, voice choked, eyes glimmering with fear and regret. She said it was for the good of the royal family. Those words fell in the room like heavy stones, making Charles curl inward, feeling his heart being crushed. William quietly took notes, not interrupting, merely observing his father's reaction. Charles furrowed his brow, hands clenched on the edge of the table, eyes fixed on the doctor, his heart full of betrayal and pain. Dr. Dunn continued, everything I did, every paper I signed, was under her instructions. I had no choice. His voice trembled as if trying to preserve the last shred of dignity. But his eyes revealed the fear that this could end his career, his reputation, and possibly even his mental well-being. Charles looked at Dunn, saying nothing, only absorbing every sound, every gesture. In his heart, all the order he had relied on suddenly shattered. William emphasized, "We need to hear the whole truth. Nothing hidden." His voice was firm but still calm, like a wall that every word had to pass. Dunn lowered his head, opened the file, hands trembling as he pointed to the pre-prepared pages. The numbers, signatures, and forged prescriptions appeared before Charles' eyes. His gaze reddened, hands slackened, heart throbbing painfully with each beat. Suddenly, William pressed a button on a small device, and the fateful recording played in the room. Camilla's voice, clear, cold, and calculated, cut through the tense atmosphere. "Let them think I am weak. Only when they pity me will the crown be ours." Charles heard the words as if his heart was being violently struck in his chest. His eyes reddened, hands fell to his sides, body sagging as if gravity had doubled. William stood rigid, eyes cold, yet a subtle flicker of sympathy crossed his gaze. The recording continued, each word cutting into the trust Charles had long given to Camilla. He realized that the love and loyalty he had offered were not only exploited, but manipulated to achieve her ambitions for power. Each confession in the recording felt like a knife slicing through the veil covering his soul. Hands trembling, eyes reddened, his heart pained as if it might stop beating. William, witnessing the scene, felt both anger and sorrow, knowing his father was enduring a pain words could not express. Charles whispered, "So, everything I believed was false." His voice choked, as if even he could not believe it himself. Every fragment of trust, every layer of affection, every hope for the woman he loved was crushed in that instant. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, leaving only the looping recording, emphasizing the betrayal and cunning plot he had never suspected. William placed a hand on his father's shoulder, a gesture both comforting and reminding that, painful as it was, the truth must be faced. Charles bowed his head, tears streaming, yet determination glimmered in his eyes. Determination not only to protect the throne, but also to reclaim justice for himself. Now he realized that love cannot conceal the truth. An exploited love becomes an unbearable source of pain. Dunn continued with detailed explanations, how Camilla forged files, created fake doctors, issued prescriptions never actually given. Each detail was a piece, forming the complete picture of Camilla's hidden scheme. Charles listened, feelings of betrayal intertwined with anger, the fury rising in his chest but kept under control, each breath heavy but measured. William and Anne had warned him before, but now Charles truly grasped the scale of the betrayal. The recording played a second time, Camilla's voice emphasizing the goal. "Only when they pity me will the crown be ours." Charles, hearing this, slumped into his chair, hands trembling on his knees. Everything around him blurred, leaving only emptiness mixed with rage. The trust and love he had long held now seemed like ashes. He wondered how deeply he had been wrong, how much he had given to someone undeserving. William observed his father in silence, eyes both sharp and full of empathy. He knew that now it was not just an investigation, but the moment Charles had to confront the stark truth. This turning point would change everything, from the operation of the royal family to the most intimate personal relationships. Charles, though in pain, began to realize that to protect honor and power, he had no choice but to face the betrayal directly. In the following minutes, Dunn explained every detail of how Camilla manipulated medical information, exploited public sympathy, and created a weak image in the media to hide her ambition. Charles listened, eyes still red, each word cutting through the long covered veil in his soul. He realized that all the empathy, all the love he gave Camilla had been used, and that his absolute trust had helped her move closer to power. In that moment, Charles felt his collapse fully. Every belief, every feeling, every past decision was in question. He murmured, "So, everything I believed was false." His voice choked, eyes reddened, hands trembling on the file, feeling as if the world were crumbling around him. William stood quietly nearby, saying nothing, letting Charles experience each feeling, each pang of inner conflict. Charles' disillusionment was not only personal pain but a shock to the entire royal family. William, with a stern gaze, understood that now there was no room for easy forgiveness. The family would face a historic decision to keep the secret or reveal the truth. Charles, in his silent yet profound moment, realized that power, love, and trust could not coexist when one element was exploited. Charles stood up, hands still trembling, eyes fixed on Dunn and William. The room was so silent that every heartbeat echoed clearly. He exhaled, voice trembling but resolute. This betrayal cannot be ignored. Every word of Camilla, every exposed act, would serve as evidence for the royal family to assert the integrity and honor of the throne. Charles understood that to protect the royal family, he must punish the one who exploited his love and trust. And that began with the resolve of this very moment. The confrontation ended, but tension still lingered. Dunn left, eyes still showing anxiety and regret. Charles sat down, eyes closed, feeling exhaustion mixed with fury. William placed a hand on his father's shoulder, reminding him that though the truth is painful, it is the only path for the royal family to survive and restore public trust. Every silent moment in that room bore witness to Charles' collapse in the most crucial turning point in his life. Every detail in the recording, every confession from Dunn, was etched into Charles' mind as a warning. Love can be exploited, trust can be betrayed, and honor must be defended with firm reason. He told himself that the next decision would not only be personal, but a historic choice for the throne and the entire royal family. Every breath, every glance, every tear reminded him that the truth always exists, and ultimately, it will be revealed, even at the cost of the greatest pain. Charles stood up, hands trembling and falling to his sides, eyes fixed on the window where weak light filtered through. He silently promised himself that love had been exploited, but honor and the royal family would be protected to the end. Inside him, old trust had shattered, yet a new determination was forming. William and Charles left the room together, walking down the long corridor, each step echoing as a reminder that a new chapter in the royal family was beginning, one marked by cold truth and the collapse of blind trust. And when the truth could no longer be hidden, what awaited was judgment, not from a court, but from the man who had once loved Camilla above all else. News leaked like a raging fire, spreading across England. The recording, once kept private by Charles and William, now appeared on media channels, social networks, and major newspapers. Headlines emphasized the plot of feigned weakness, articles analyzed her manipulative actions in detail, and public outrage surged relentlessly. On social media, thousands of comments expressed shock, disappointment, and fury. Everything became public, with no path back, no protective veil. Every word in the papers, every illustrative image, every tweet pierced the carefully constructed image Camilla had built over the years. Outside the palace, reporters gathered, camera flashes flickering, microphones pointed at the main gate, awaiting any sign from the royal family. Citizens clustered nearby, whispering and speculating about the scandal. Prominent journalists crafted headlines, power plot exposed, Camilla loses everything. The truth behind the weakness or strategy revealed. The British monarchy faces an unprecedented media storm. The atmosphere was tense and chaotic, yet inside the palace, everything remained unnervingly quiet, as if the outside world belonged to another reality, while inside, decisions determining fate awaited. The royal council convened urgently in a large room, soft yellow light illuminating solemn faces. Charles sat at the head of the table, eyes full of pain yet resolute, hands gripping the edge of the table. William stood beside him, eyes sharp, voice firm. We cannot remain silent any longer. Anne sat nearby, sharp features, eyes unforgiving. listening intently to every detail and analysis from advisors. The tension was taut, each word, each gesture heavy with responsibility and historical consequence. Other royal family members listened, concern visible, aware that the upcoming decision would affect not just one individual, but the honor of the throne and public trust. Charles took a sip of tea, eyes scanning the transcript of the recording and forged documents provided by Dunn. Each detail reminded him again of the betrayal, prescriptions never issued, doctors existing only on paper, medical records meticulously forged. In Charles' heart, pain mingled with anger. He realized his love had been exploited, his trust used as a tool for power. Each moment made his heart ache, yet reason began to prevail, reminding him that to protect the monarchy, there was no room for leniency. Advisors proposed options, but Charles looked straight ahead, voice trembling yet decisive. The decision must be strict and transparent. William, Anne, and other members nodded in agreement. No one spoke much, only the heavy silence of those witnessing a tragedy about to unfold. Charles knew that punishing Camilla was not just a personal act, but a clear statement of the royal family's integrity and authority. The moment to sign the decree arrived. The pen hovered on the paper, trembling slightly under Charles' hand, yet his eyes remained resolute. Each stroke marked the end of a chapter while opening a new tragedy for Camilla. Every breath was heavy, the sound of the pen against paper echoed in silence, a reminder of the power of truth. Charles signed, lowered the pen, eyes scanning the files and recording, heart aching, but the pain was accompanied by a sense of release. This decision would teach Camilla a costly lesson while affirming that trust and honor could not be exploited with impunity. And then Camilla left the palace. Rain poured, each drop striking the ground hard, mingling with tears she could no longer hide. No farewells, no greetings, only the sound of lonely footsteps on the slippery stone path. She bowed her head, hair soaked, face marked by sorrow, showing all her loneliness and disappointment. This scene was not just the end for Camilla and the royal family, but a symbol of the tragedy caused by ambition and deceit. Wiltshire, where Camilla retreated, appeared bleak. The old mansion, damp walls, weak light seeping through gray curtains. Inside, everything exuded coldness and emptiness. Camilla entered the main room, once a place where she imagined love and power could coexist. Now, it reflected only solitude, gloom, and despair. She sat in the chair, watching raindrops fall outside the window, and finally uttered her last words, choked and tragic. "I only wanted to be loved. That's all." The voice resonated silently but heavily. It was not only the lament of a failed individual, but evidence of the tragedy of power and ambition. Camilla had traded love for power, but in the end, lost both. Solitude, gloom, and disappointment marked every expression, every action, every moment in the empty room. Every detail, from the light, the falling rain, to the wind whistling through the cracks, reminded that deceit and ambition carry inevitable consequences. Outside, the media continued to stir. Public discussion remained relentless. But in Wiltshire, Camilla no longer cared about the noise outside. Only herself and her loneliness remained. In the following days, the mansion was silent. No laughter, no footsteps, only the steady rain, reminding of a life that once craved power and love, now reduced to emptiness and tragedy. Charles, after signing the decree, returned to royal duties, eyes still carrying traces of pain. Yet a new determination had formed within him. This event was not only a lesson about trust and love, but also proof that power must come with transparency, honor must be protected, and all deceitful schemes will ultimately be revealed. William stood beside him, eyes stern but reassuring, recognizing that his father had just undergone a historic turning point, a decision both personal and symbolic for the entire royal family. The image of Camilla leaving the palace in the rain, quiet and alone, became a symbol of the collapse of ambitions concealed by lies. Every manipulation, every fake act, now held no value. Her tragedy proved that power without integrity and genuine love leads to complete failure. Charles punished not only for personal betrayal, but to safeguard the throne, honor, and the trust of the royal family. Wiltshire remained drenched, the mansion damp, cold, and bleak, reflecting Camilla's indelible loneliness. Every step in the room, every glance to the window, every sigh reminded that her life had changed direction, and this tragedy would forever serve as a historical lesson for the British monarchy about power, love, and truth. Charles stood before the palace window, looking at the gray sky, feeling both the weight and the release. He realized that through pain and betrayal, the monarchy had endured, and faith in justice and integrity had been restored. William and Anne stood nearby, eyes stern but hopeful, understanding that a new chapter had begun, one guided by truth, honor, and responsibility. This event did not only end Camilla's tragedy, but opened a new chapter for the royal family, where love would no longer be exploited. Power must be transparent, and trust would always be protected. The rainy days in Wiltshire, the gloomy walls, the lonely footsteps, all testified to the consequences of ambition and deceit, reminding that no one can forever stand above the truth. And then, after all the losses, what remained was not just a wounded monarchy, but a costly lesson about power, trust, and vulnerability. We witnessed a tragedy that did not stop at calculated actions or hidden schemes, but ran deep within every relationship, every human heart. Love, trust, and ambition collided violently, leaving scars that could never be erased. Charles, who had once loved Camilla wholeheartedly, now had to face betrayal, the pain of feelings that had been exploited. William and Anne, with sharp reason and loyalty to the royal family, stood firm to protect honor and public trust, while Camilla, who once sought power and love, was ultimately left alone in the tragedy of her own making. This story is not just about the British monarchy. It is a warning for anyone who has ever thought that power can be achieved by sacrificing affection, by exploiting the trust of others. It reminds us that in love and power, what is truly real? Could it be that sometimes vulnerability is not something to be protected, but rather something capable of toppling an entire monarchy? Every ambition has its price, but perhaps the costliest of all is losing someone who once trusted you unconditionally. Camilla's tragedy, Charles's pain, and the royal family's decisions to protect honor all remind us of the value of trust, genuine love, and honesty. And when the fog of schemes dissipates, only the truth remains. No one can stand above love and honor forever.